storm is coming.
I thought I was staring back in my own deranged reflection. But I was wrong. He needed me. Fate works in strange ways. So when one journey ends, another must begin. And this long, winding road will lead me to a new destination. Have you heard the good news? He only hears my truth. Fate works in strange ways. She dances and sings in the light. She lurks in the shadows, and she always gets her way. He has a home.
Yo, Aaliyah with you? What?
ACT, did you see this?
Look, if it ain't OfficialDanaJay, Levi for Kelly, or Prima Donna News, I don't even want to see it. Just take the ball. Look, you got some weed? Dang. I gotta get some. All right, hurry up. Diesel and them here, everybody here, we waiting on you. All right.
I know that there's more. More for you, more for us.
DJ discretion.
Low still sick, I ain't talking the pandemic.
DJ discretion.
Low still sick, I ain't talking the pandemic.
DJ discretion.
Low still sick, I ain't talking the pandemic.
Say you love it, what you gon' do now? Hope you're ready, cause I'm really about to put it down. Girl, you know that I will never disrespect you. We love tomorrow, but tonight I
grass not supposed to be green, like faith's not supposed to be seen. The sky's not supposed to touch the ground, and a square's not supposed to be round. The moon's not supposed to touch the sun, and a 2 is not supposed to be a 1. Then the heart's not supposed to weigh a ton, and forever's not supposed to be done. Winter's not supposed to come in June, and I am not supposed to have the blues. There are so many things that are not supposed to be, babe, except you and me. There are so many things that I'm not supposed to be. Ooh, baby, yeah, except you and me. Night's not supposed to be long. Yeah. No one is supposed to be alone. Understanding is not supposed to be confused, and the wind is not supposed to lose. Like fire's not supposed to freeze, or like joy is not supposed to grieve. Like you are not supposed to leave. What I said I'm not supposed to mean. He is not supposed to have your heart. Baby, we are not supposed to be apart. There are so many things that are not supposed to be said. You and me. There are so many things that are not supposed to be. Hey, baby, it seems just like no seasons changing, or this earth with no creation, or a heart with no feelings, or a sickness without a healing. Just like a frozen spring, or a bird with no wings. Just like a song out of key, that's how my life would be. Like the night skies with no stars, a lonely broken heart, no holding hands or walks in the park. That's how it would be if we were apart. Ooh. There are so many things, yeah, except love. So many things that are not supposed to be. It's like having nowhere to breathe. Like having no words to breathe. Like having no rain for the sea. There are so many things that's not supposed to be. Not supposed to be. Except you and me, baby. Yeah, yeah, baby, yeah, except you and me.
What up, what up, what up? We back. What's going on? What y'all up to? Oh, man, I'm coming back to drop the R. Kelly motion that just came out. I'm just saying we're going to drop it. Nah, Miss Darlene ain't blocked. Check this out. I'm going to say this before I even get started. Mods, be very careful of who y'all blocking, cause y'all blocking people for no reason. Only block them if they disrespectful. That's just real talk. Cause y'all blocking people for no reason, and come on, man. I don't want to have to do a special blocking group, but come on. Let's stop that. Willie, is Miss Darlene in here? What's going on, y'all? What's going on? Because she's not on the block list. But I'm going to say this real quick. But I understand that lady over there trying to go live about me, but a motherfucker that look like this, I'm not going live about.
Jesus Christ!
Who's your friend? Oh, do you find me sexy? Oh, look at my titties.
Oh, my titties! Ha!
I'm not going to give it no energy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not. Willie, is Miss Darlene in here? Because she's not on my block list. King Chris said, laugh my ass off. You look like that, your dancer. I doubt it. I doubt it. But you're an avatar, though. And again, I'm just going to keep it a buck. Avatars don't get no love over here, bro. So what I'm going to say is this right here. Take this with stride, okay?
All right, oh, I got a feeling. Oh, you finna get blocked. Yep, you finna get blocked. You put your cat.
She ain't in the chat. Okay, Willie, I got to see if she's, you know. Because she's not on my block list. I hate going through this, man. Yeah. I ain't going back and forth. I'm just letting them know. You about to get blocked. But look, this right here, I'm going to give it to y'all real quick. Richard Arline, and for y'all that don't know, that Richard Arline did get sentenced today. And Richard Arline judgment is as follows. This is judgment. He pleaded guilty to counts of 1 of the information. Wow. Count 1 of the information. So it's like this what they give you. They break it down. Nature of offense, robbery. Now, for robbery, that's automatically 25 years. The defendant is sentenced as provided in pages 2 through 4 of this judgment. The sentence is imposed pursuant to the Sentencing Reform Act of 1984. The defendant is found not guilty on counts, none. And Donnelly, imprisonment. The defendant is hereby committed, none of that. He got a $100 assessment fine. The defendant must pay the total criminal monetary penalties under the schedule of payments on sheet 6. Lump sum of $100 due immediately, balance due. And Donnelly paid or had the BOP pay for him to get there and to get back. Wow. And it says, judgment as to Richard Arline Jr., defendant Arline sentenced on 1 counts, 1 to time served, $100 special assessment ordered by Judge Annam Donnelly on 6/8/2022. So if he got that, right? We gonna go here. This is the government. This is the government. Should make you mad. But here we go. United States versus Robert Chester Kelly, criminal docket number 19-286 S3 AMD. Dear Judge Donnelly, the government respectfully submits this letter in connection with the sentencing of the defendant Robert Sylvester Kelly, scheduled on June 29, 2022. In light of the seriousness of the offenses, the need for specific deterrence, and the need to protect the public from further crimes of the defendant, as well as the other factors set forth in 18 U.S.C. 3553A. The government respectfully submits that a sentence in excess of 25 years is warranted. Background. Wow. The sentence in excess of 25 years is warranted. Background. The evidence adduced at trial consisted of testimony from 50 witnesses, 45 witnesses called by the government and 5 called by the defendant, and hundreds of exhibits admitted at trial. Stop for a second. This shit pisses me off. Why nobody is holding Sean Harris accountable for this shit? Why nobody is holding Sean Harris accountable? 5 fucking witnesses. 5. Called by the defendant. That's not true. But nobody want to hold Sean Harris accountable for this. Sean Harris was the one in charge of getting everybody there. Make it make sense. And hundreds of exhibits admitted at trial. A complete summary of the evidence including the enterprise, its purpose and methods, supporting each of the counts of which the defendant was convicted, was included in the government's opposition to the defendant's motion for a judgment of acquittal. Government memorandum of law and OPP to the DFT's MOT for a judgment of acquittal dated March 21st, 2022, ECF docket entry number 278, which detailed factual summary of incorporated herein by reference. As established at trial, and it was not established, but as established at trial and set forth in the pre-sentence investigation report, PSR, and its addendum with the aid of his inner circle and over a period of decades, the defendant preyed upon children and young women for his own sexual gratification in order to carry out his many crimes. The defendant relied upon his fame, money, and popularity as an R&B recording star and used the large network of people his status afforded him, including his business managers, security guards, and bouncers, runners, lawyers, accountants, and assistants, to both carry out and conceal his crimes. He continued his crimes and avoided punishment for them for almost 30 years and must now be held to account. Generally speaking, the conduct underlying the defendant's crimes of conviction falls within the following 4 categories. 1, enticement of children. 2, the sexual exploitation of children through the production of child pornography. 3, forced labor. And 4, exposure of others through unprotected sexual intercourse to an incurable communicable disease, namely genital herpes, without first informing his sexual partners and obtaining consent to sexual intercourse in these circumstances. Stop for a second. I heard where Geronda said that she had sex with Bubba too, right? So how Bubba don't have herpes, but Geronda got herpes? I meant to ask that. How Robert and Azriel supposed to have herpes, but Richard Arline don't have herpes? Joy don't have herpes. Nephew don't have herpes. Can somebody explain this to me? Because evidently I must be slow as shit and don't know. But let's go. Enticement of children. As established at trial, the defendant has a long and persuasive history of enticing children to engage in sexual activity, including when they were too young to legally consent to sexual activity. His career as a recording artist and performer took him all over the United States and the world for concert tours, other performances, and an event starting in the early 1990s, and he quickly took advantage of his access to adoring fans and musical hopefuls who jumped at the chance to meet him. He lured young girls and boys into his orbit, lies, often through empty or conditioned promises of assistance in developing a career in the entertainment industry, or simply by playing into the minors. Understandable desire to meet and spend time with a popular celebrity, notably believing, rightly for a period of time, that his fame and role as leader of the enterprise made him untouchable. The defendant often engaged in this criminal conduct in plain sight, doing so around and or with the assistance of others. In the early 1990s, the defendant sexually abused Jane Doe number 7, who testified at trial using the pseudonym Angela, beginning when she was 14 or 15 years old. Lies. The sexual abuse began immediately after the defendant met Angela for the first time at his small 2-bedroom apartment, along with at least 2 other girls who were also in high school and with whom the defendant also engaged in illegal sexual activity. What? The defendant sexually abused Angela and the other girls in his bedroom while members of his inner circle were in the living room area directly outside. As would become a pattern, the defendant made clear to Angela and the other girls, who the defendant later formed into a girl group, and in the case of Angela, employed as a background dancer for his tours. Oh my God, this is a fucking lie. Javante? This is a lie. The sexual activity with him was the price of admission to be around him and get access to any opportunities he could provide them within the music industry. As Angela testified, the defendant made clear to her and other girls in no uncertain terms that they had to pay their dues and engage in... Made clear to her and other girls in no uncertain terms that they had to pay their dues and engage in sexual activity with the defendant at his discretion and at times for violating his rules. Let me go back. As Angela testified, the defendant made clear to her and other girls in no uncertain terms that they had to pay their dues and engage in sexual activity with the defendant at his direction and at times for violating his rules. So basically, they wanted to do it. If he even laid the groundwork like, yo, y'all don't gotta do this. And they must have had fake IDs, because he's not going to talk to nobody at 14 or 15 years old. Stop this, man. In 1992 or 93, the defendant met Aaliyah Halton. Wait a minute. I thought what? An inspiring singer who subsequently became his musical protege and began to sexually abuse her when she was just 12 or 13 years old. What the fuck? The government lined out the skin of their teeth. The defendant used his access to young Aaliyah, claiming to need extra time alone with her for rehearsal and bringing her on tours to show her the ropes, to carry out his abuse of her. She's not even here. She even said that they never did anything. Yo, come on, bro. One time even shamelessly sexually abusing her by giving her oral sex in the back of his tour bus while others were in the vicinity. That's something that Javante said and lied. That's some shit that Earl told her. See, this the shit I don't like, man. Faced with the possibility that his abuse of Aaliyah would be made public after she believed that she was pregnant at just 15 years old in August 1994, the defendant gathered members of his enterprise to help him carry out the robbery of a government official so that he could fraudulently and surreptitiously marry Aaliyah in an attempt to conceal the abuse and avoid punishment. What? That's the shit Demetrius... Come on, bro. Not only did the defendant abuse Aaliyah, who because of her untimely death in 2001 airplane crash could not testify at trial, but he made her party to his criminal cover-up scheme, having her fraudulently sign a marriage application. Wait a minute. Is a difference. Is a difference. Hold on. I thought it was a marriage certificate. An application and a certificate is different. Oh no. Oh no. Hell no. Where is the marriage certificate that everybody said it was there? An application and a certificate is different. Hell no. Right, Gemini Don, and Demetrius debunked that at trial. But wait, where is the application? Where's the marriage certificate? An application and a certificate is two different things. And they said this man was married to her, and they said that it was a marriage certificate. And I told everybody it was a fake ass marriage certificate. Now you hear them saying an application. Now you hear them saying an application. No, it ain't no app. No, we want to see the certificate. We want to see the marriage certificate, the fake one. No. Hey, Susie Q, we want to see the fake marriage certificate. No, fuck that. Not an application. Not a damn application. I'm good, Cali girl. I want to see a certificate. If you're going to charge them with it, I want to see it. Having her fraudulently sign a marriage certificate, a marriage application, which he had nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. And Demetrius even told him, Robb ain't had nothing to do with that. But look what the government doing. This is why I say what I say. The government is lying. Just like in Chicago. We got a Roshona. And people talking about, oh yeah, they got a Roshona. Listen, if the government lie about one thing, they will lie about everything. Let's keep it a buck. Right. Who were the witnesses that signed the marriage certificate? Thank you. Thank you. And the man in Chicago said there was never a marriage certificate on file in Chicago. And Demetrius went and got her a food stamp card. And it wasn't even a marriage application. It was a food stamp application. Come on, man. Using the illegally obtained identification to falsely claim she was 18 years old. Sad. In September 1984, just days after secretly marrying 15 years old Aaliyah, the defendant sexually assaulted a 17-year-old girl identified in the PSR as Jane Doe number 8 and who testified at trial as Addie. What? After two of the defendant's associates approached her and brought her and her friend backstage to get the defendant's autograph after a performance because Addie was just 17. She was not old enough to consent to such sexual conduct in Florida. Huh? Addie was brought to the defendant's dressing room, which was filled with press and other men, where she spoke briefly to the defendant, who not only provided his autograph on her concert program, but also wrote down his hotel room number. About the fact that she was an inspiring dancer. True to form, the defendant mentioned the possibility of an audition, and after learning from Addie that she was 17, had his associate clear the room of everybody except for him. Addie and her friend, within minutes, in that locked dressing room, the defendant began kissing Addie and her friend, became aggressive, moved Addie to one side of the room, held her wrists, pulled down her shorts, and penetrated her vagina from behind with his penis. When the defendant was finished, shocked and scared, Addie ran from the room with her friend. Get the fuck out of here. Man, boy. Canick poked that hole in that. In or about 1985, the defendant met Jane Doe number 9, a 17-year-old girl at a Florida mall, and thereafter commenced a sexual relationship with her in violation of Florida law. Notably, Jane Doe number 9 contracted herpes during her relationship with the defendant and disclosed her diagnosis to the defendant. At the time of her diagnosis, Jane Doe number 9 was only sexually active with the defendant. What the fuck? Prove it. In or about 1998, the defendant noticed Stephanie, because I don't remember that being at trial. In or about 1998, the defendant noticed Stephanie at the Rock and Roll McDonald's in Chicago and had one of his associates approach her. Point the defendant out and give Stephanie the defendant's telephone number. Notwithstanding that Stephanie had informed the associate she was only 16 years old at the time, Stephanie discarded the telephone number and did not contact the defendant at the time. Oh, okay. This is the one that lied on the stand and got caught. And they still charged him with that. Approximately a year later, when Stephanie was 17 years old, she approached the defendant after learning that, approximately a year later, when Stephanie was 17 years old, she approached the defendant after learning that he was at a nearby Nike store to see if he was willing to listen to our friend, an inspiring vocalist, sing and potentially help that friend with her career. The defendant told Stephanie that he thought we could arrange that, but he liked to get to know Stephanie, and he also said that he likes to cuddle and would Stephanie be okay with that? To which Stephanie responded, yes. Transcript 1630. The defendant then gave Stephanie his telephone number and told Stephanie to call him, which she ultimately did. Thereafter, the defendant invited Stephanie to his Chicago studio, and the two ultimately engaged in sexual intercourse. Stop. Wait a minute. Everybody, please go get that transcript 1630, Stephanie. Because in that whole thing, and read when Canick crossed her. Read when Canick crossed her. That's when she got caught lying about all this. What up, Prima? Notably, the defendant was aware of Stephanie's age, as Stephanie told him she was 17 years old. On either the first or second occasion she visited the defendant's studio. Stop. Okay, if he had sex with her on the first time that she went, are you for sure that Stephanie told him she was 17 either on the first or the second occasion? Make it make sense. But still, 17 is legal in Chicago. So where's the problem? Why would she go to try to do business with him at 17? Come on, man. Y'all crazy. Why y'all not talking about, and when Stephanie got into the car and she presented a fake ID. See, presenting fake ID seemed like a thing to do in Chicago. They continued to have sex over the next approximately 6 months. Stephanie's sexual interactions with the defendant were humiliating. Stephanie described those interactions as follows. He would be very specific in how he wanted me to be. What man is not specific in how they want their woman to be sexually? He would put me in positions that he wanted me to be in. What man don't put females in positions? What female don't put men in positions? He would tell me that he wanted me. He'd tell me to get undressed, and then he would position my body in a way, and he would then say, all right, I'm going to go, and when I come back, I want you to be just like this. So I would just be completely naked with my butt in the air, and just like waiting for him, and just like waiting there for him to come have his way, sometimes hours. Bullshit. I call bullshit. When the defendant returned to the room and Stephanie was not in a position he had told her to be in, the defendant became very disappointed and angry, yelling at her. At some point after Stephanie had told the defendant she was 17, and while she remained 17, the defendant took Stephanie to his townhouse and directed her to participate in the creation of child pornography, videotaping. Okay, where's the child pornography? Where's the videotape? They did not produce that. So you can't use that. Her naked and as the engaged in sexual activity with her. On another occasion, and approximately October 1999, Stephanie traveled to see the defendant in Orlando. Wait. But Stephanie was above age. Orlando, Florida. While there, the defendant took Stephanie to a recording studio and used a handheld video camera to record Stephanie's face as his penis was in her mouth and she was giving him oral sex. And yet another act of humiliation. The defendant ejaculated on Stephanie's face and did not let her wipe it off, instead telling Stephanie she had to walk down the hall in a more public area of the studio to another bathroom to wipe her face. Oh my God, this is such bullshit, bro. During the course of her time with the defendant, he made clear to Stephanie that she was not permitted to speak to other men. On one occasion, she was at a Houston's restaurant in Chicago with the defendant and two rappers. Stephanie was not allowed to speak to the rappers during the meal, but heard the defendant tell them that he likes young girls and that people make such a big deal of it, but it really isn't a big deal because even look at Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a genius and I'm a genius, and we should be allowed to do whatever we want because of what we give to this world. That don't even make sense. That don't even sound like something he would say. Come on, man. Thus evincing his clear belief that he could act with impunity and committing crimes involving minors because of his self-proclaimed musical genius status, which in his mind constituted a free pass to do as he pleased without consequence. In 2005, the defendant spotted Alexis, then just 15 years old, after one of his concerts and thereafter began a years-long sexual relationship with her. That same year, the defendant met a teenage boy who testified at trial using the pseudonym Richard Arline. Then 17 years. Stephanie turned 18 in mid-October 1999. She could not recall whether this trip occurred before or after her 18th birthday. Oh my God. She could not recall whether this trip occurred before or after her 18th birthday. Alexis is identified as Jane Doe 13 in the PSR and the government's eliminate motions. Lewis is identified as John Doe number 1 in the PSR and the government's eliminate motions. 18 years old while he was working at a McDonald's close to where the defendant played basketball at the time. After first meeting Lewis, the defendant used his status in the music industry to induce Lewis to meet with him again. The defendant also groomed Lewis and his family, inviting them to a party at his home and having Lewis meet him at his home studio in Olympia Fields. When the defendant had Lewis alone, he asked Lewis, who had dreams of making it as a rapper, what Lewis was willing to do to make it in the business. After which the defendant gave Lewis, still just 17 years old, oral sex and video recorded their sexual encounter. What? When he said that in court, Canning asked him, was it true? He said no. On another occasion, the defendant also directed a female who Lewis did not know to give Lewis oral sex while the defendant watched. Lewis testified that the defendant made clear to Lewis that sexual contact with him was a prerequisite if Lewis wanted the defendant to help him in the music business. Like others, the defendant's promises to help Lewis in the music industry were empty and instead just a ploy to entice a 17-year-old boy to have sexual contact with the defendant and others at his discretion and on certain occasions. To film that conduct. Stop. Do Richard Arline have herpes? Do Richard Arline have herpes? If Richard Arline don't have herpes, that herpes shit is bullshit. Since they trying to say that he fucked little boys, and that he had sex with him, Richard Arline, and should have herpes, right? Exactly, Willie. If he don't have herpes, that shit is bullshit. Right. Arline and his friend admit to lying. Thank you. In 2009, and continuing for a 6-month period into 2010, the defendant sexually abused Geronda. What? Who was then 16 years old and a big fan of the defendant's music. The defendant invited Geronda to his home and once alone with her, directed Geronda to remove her clothing and walk back and forth naked before him. The defendant thereafter engaged in sexual contact with Geronda and then had sexual intercourse with her, at times, as described further below, making sexually explicit videos of Geronda while she was 16. That same year, the defendant began to have sexual contact with Dominique, who was just 17 years old. To meet Dominique, the defendant relied upon the 16-year-old Geronda to introduce him to Dominique, one of her friends. In 2015, the defendant met another young girl who testified. Oh, wait. Stop. Let's back something up. If Geronda introduced Dominique to Robb, and Dominique became the main one, right? Where do Bubba fits in all this? Why nobody talking about the sexual intercourse that she had with Bubba? Oh, I get it. Bubba's not the big fish. So you throw away the ponds just to get the big fish. I get it. In 2015, the defendant met another young girl who testified under the pseudonym Jane Azriel at trial, who was 17 years old, after spotting her at one of his concerts and using members of his entourage to ensure Jane received his telephone number. That's bullshit, and that's wrong. Shortly thereafter, the defendant engaged in sexual contact with Jane under the guise of an audition in his hotel room and soon convinced Jane to travel across the country with him and ultimately to spend her senior year of high school living with him. That's not true at all. In April 2015, the defendant arranged for Jane to travel from Orlando to Los Angeles to see him. Again, the defendant promised to help Jane with her musical aspirations, a false promise he used to entice her to remain with him. What? Notably, when Jane disclosed that the defendant to the defendant that she was 17 years old, rather than end his relationship with Jane, the defendant arranged for the mother and another of his girlfriend's juice to serve on paper as Jane's purported legal guardian. Wait. The government is caught in another lie. The defendant arranged for the mother of another of his girlfriend's juice to serve on paper as Jane's purported legal guardian while the defendant continued to travel, live, and have sex with Jane. That's totally wrong. Oh, that's totally wrong. Geronda is identified in the third superseding indictment and the PSR as Jane Doe number 4. Dominique is identified in the PSR and the government's in limine motions as Jane Doe 17. Notably, in 2017, the defendant revealed to Faith that there is some females that I'm raising. I have a group of women that I raise. He said some women have been with me during the course of time. Jane was with the defendant. Wait a minute. Why did it switch like that? Jesus. During the course of time, Jane was with the defendant, and as described in more detail below, he prescribed a number of rules for Jane and his other girlfriends to follow, exercising coercive control over them. The defendant began enforcing these rules shortly after Jane met him by punishing her when she did not follow his prescribed rules or comply with the established protocols. Those punishments included spankings, which the defendant called chastisements, vicious physical assaults, and confinement of Jane to a room or a bus for prolonged periods of time. 2. Production of child pornography. For decades, the defendant also created and maintained child pornography. Several witnesses testified that the defendant recorded their engaging in sexual activity with the defendant and others at the defendant's discretion. Witness after witness described how the defendant scripted every aspect of the sexual activity, acting as the writer, producer, and director of each encounter. As described above, in 1999, the defendant sexually exploited Stephanie. He summoned her to his house, where he filmed her engaging in sexual explicit behavior and them having sex. Fearful that the recording might be distributed, Stephanie begged the defendant to return or destroy the recording, but he never did. To this day, Stephanie fears that the recording still exists. In later years, the defendant also recorded Geronda and Jane also engaging in sexually explicit conduct while they were each under 18 years old. 3. Forced labor. The defendant methodically groomed the women and girls in his orbit to meet all of his sexual needs. First he promulgated an extensive set of rules. He had the women and girls call him daddy and directed them to wear sweats and other baggy clothing. When he entered a room, he expected the women and girls to immediately stand and greet him with a kiss. What? I'm lost. In more recent years, including the entirety of the time Jane spent with him, the defendant's coercive tactics grew even more brazen. The defendant did not permit the women and girls to speak with or even look at other men. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Who want to be with a woman that's going to be draped over another man? I'll wait. Question. What woman want to be with a man that's draped over another woman? I'll wait. In an elevator, they were expected to turn to face the back. What? That's a lie. While walking through hallways, they were expected to look to the floor. In commercial establishments, they had to direct their inquiries to a female employee or leave the establishment. In court, that was proved to be a lie too. Prima Donna, I'm with you. I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck this got to do with New York anyway. Exactly. I'm trying to figure that out too. As part of his grooming process, the defendant severely isolated the women and girls. The defendant discouraged communication with their family members and friends and prohibited the use of social media. So if that's the case, how was Azrael on social media? How was Joy on social media? Stop. They were also not permitted to exchange personal information with the other women who lived with the defendant. 5 years. Some women have been with me for a year. Some women have been with me for 15 years. At trial, Dr. Dawn Hughes testified that isolation, indoctrination, intimidation, subjugation, surveillance, secrecy, humiliation, and collateral all may be used as a means of coercive control. Jane is identified in the third superseding indictment and the PSR as to Jane Doe number 5. When the defendant arranged for women and girls to visit him, the defendant required them to spend their time waiting for him in a location that he dictated. Within a few weeks of meeting the defendant and traveling to Las Vegas with him, Jane tried to go to the mall, but an assistant made clear to her that she would need to first get the defendant's permission. Jane told her mom everyone was having fun, but the defendant told her, "Do not leave that room." GX2331. Faith testified that she spent hours on a Sprinter van waiting for the defendant, only leaving to go to the bathroom, and only when she had the defendant's permission. More genuinely, witnesses advised that they often accompanied the defendant in to meetings, social gatherings at restaurants and bars and other events. But the defendant often directed them to stay on a Sprinter van while he went to the meeting, gathering, or event. If they needed a bathroom and could not obtain permission from the defendant to leave the van, they had to urinate in a cup. That is not true. They even said that that was false. When the defendant learned that one woman had left the bus at a pit stop during a long distance drive without first obtaining the defendant's permission, he became enraged. An assistant testified that when the defendant learned of this transgression, she had never seen the defendant so upset. The defendant required the women and girls to regularly write letters. Oh my God. Purportedly confessing to genuinely false criminal activity and other embarrassing conduct. In these letters, they falsely confessed to stealing money and jewelry. They falsely admitted concocting elaborate robberies. What? One falsely claimed that she seduced the defendant when she was underage and threatened to claim he raped her if he would not engage in sexual activity with her. For safekeeping, the defendant kept certain of these letters in a document protector and in a locked safe. Okay, now let me ask this question. If Robert kept those letters in a locked safe and in document protectors, the lifespan of paper is only 2 years and harsh conditions. So if it's in storage, it's going through constant weather conditions. I don't care if it's climate controlled or what. The outside conditions still seep through in a storage place. That means the letters would have been deteriorated. So how was the letters like brand new if Robb been keeping them in a safe place? Somebody had to write them and put them there at that time. Stop playing with me, man. The defendant also had certain women record videos in which they falsely claimed that family members had abused them. To make the allegations in these recordings appear genuine, the defendant directed the women to make their confessions shortly after he had physically assaulted them and had caused them to shed real tears of pain. The defendant also directed certain women to make videos depicting themselves engaging in humiliating behavior. At least 3 women made videos of themselves eating feces and rubbing it over their bodies. He filmed another young woman walking back and forth naked, making derogatory comments about herself, which he directed her to repeat over and over and over after first spanking her multiple times. Okay, where was that video at? Because none of that was proven. That's just word of mouth. None of that was proven in court. That's just word of mouth. The defendant required the women and girls to abide by all his rules and punish anyone who violated those rules. He once sent a message to Jane, I knew you were young, but that is no excuse to disobey me or not do what I tell you to do. GX 481. Significantly, the defendant also required women and girls to report any perceived violations by others. The consequences for disobeying the defendant included violent spankings, other physical assaults, physical restraint, and threats. He imposed these spankings on a regular basis. Jane recalled their occurring multiple times a week for a period of years. The spankings were painful and made clear by one such incident video recorded by the defendant and played for the court at the jury. Wait a minute. That ain't had him to do with Faith or Azriel. So stop, man. They trying to mix it up. GX 382A, GX 328B. That ain't had nothing to do with Azriel. That's when Lisa Van Allen stole this stuff. Come on, man. For what he perceived as greater violations, the defendant physically assaulted the women and girls using shoes, extension cords, and other objects in his grasp. On other occasions, he required the women or girl or a girl to remain in her room or on a bus prolonged periods of time. On one occasion, he told one young woman who he perceived had disobeyed him that people are murdered for doing shit like this. That's Lisa Van Allen. And that's for stealing from him. He then told the same woman that she needed to be on his team or else. No, that was word of mouth, but that wasn't proven by video. If you bullshit me now, then I'm going to look at you like you're not on my team at all. The physical abuse by the defendant was severe. For example, Jane testified that on one occasion, the defendant spanked Jane and 2 other women who then lived with the defendant 15 times after they paired off and spoke openly about their relationships with the defendant in violation of the defendant's rules. On another occasion, when Jane was just 17 years old, stood 4'11", and weighed a mere 98 pounds, the defendant beat Jane all over her body with his fists and with his shoe. What? Jane also testified that she saw the defendant physically abuse his living girlfriends. I have seen him slap his other living girlfriends, open palm. I have seen him drag them by their hair. I have seen them punch them in their face and all over their bodies. And I have also seen him hit them with objects. I've seen the defendant also use shoes, and also once I did see him use a cord of some sort. Sometimes as punishment, the defendant confined women and girls to a particular location for a prolonged period of time. Why is this repeating itself? Jane testified that the defendant sometimes directed her to stay in the room until he determined that she had sufficiently apologized. Text messages from December of 2015 to one of her close friends directly support Jane's account. She wrote, "I was like, can I take a shower? Can I take a shower?" And he, the defendant, was like, "No, you're going to stay in the room." One of his assistants saw the defendant's abuse and contemporaneously commented that Jane had been confined since the day before. On another occasion, an assistant saw the defendant confine Jane again, this time for a 2-day period, and relied on the assistant and another woman to alternately keep watch over her, over Jane. That's what one of the Mayweather sisters said. Relying on the pattern of activities described above and much more, the defendant regularly required the women and girls to engage in sexual contact with him and others upon his command, including upon threat of physical violence. For example, the defendant's sexual and physical abuse of Geronda culminated when the defendant slapped her and choked her until she passed out, spit on her, and told her to put down her head in shame. When Geronda got up off the floor, the defendant instructed her to perform oral sex on him. And after Geronda complied with his instruction, he ejaculated on her face. I'm lost. This is all hearsay. After regularly physically and psychologically abusing Jane and other women, he required them to have sex with other women and even men. The defendant directed when these encounters took place, who participated, and the particular sexual acts performed during the encounters, and often recorded them. The defendant regularly required Jane to have sexual contact with other men and women at his direction, including the women living with him. His assistants, Lily and Cassandra. What? Whoa, wait a minute. Hold the fuck up. Hold up. The defendant regularly required Jane to travel to have sexual The defendant regularly required Jane to have sexual contact with other men and women at his direction, including the women living with him, his assistants, Lily and Cassandra, and a man he referred to as nephew, whom he had never even seen prior to the defendant, whom she had never even seen prior to the defendant directing her to have sex with him. What the hell? What the hell is that? They mixing up stories. They add names. So Cassandra, hold the fuck up. Cassandra ain't no Robert. What the hell is going on? This is all over the place. Cassandra ain't no Robert until Dr. Rogers brought her in. And that's when Cassandra was saying that they his sisters. Like, what the hell is really going on? Wait. One such sexual encounter was vividly depicted in government exhibits 341, 342, and 343. A video of a sexual encounter between the man Jane knew only as nephew, who testified as Alex, and another of the defendant's living girlfriends. The video showed the defendant directing the woman to give Alex oral sex and then to have sexual intercourse with him. Specifically, the defendant physically positioned the woman so that she was in the precise sexual position the defendant wanted, GX 342C, and held onto the woman's hair as he forcefully and repeatedly pushed her mouth onto Alex's penis. The defendant maintained total control throughout that encounter. In fact, their facial expressions showed two people who appeared positively numb to what was happening. They just listened to the defendant and executed his commands. So stop. So now threesomes is a crime? Threesomes of age people is a crime? Big Vi, they've been listening to YouTube. Yep. On another occasion, upset that Faith had broken one of his rules, the defendant required her to give him oral sex after bringing her into a tiny room where a gun was present, grilling her with questions and telling her that there would be consequences if she lied. This, with his gun nearby, the defendant then placed a pillow on the floor, told Faith to get on her knees, pulled out his penis, grabbed the back of Faith's neck, told her to suck his dick, and pushed her forward so her mouth made contact with his penis. Scared and intimidated, Faith acquiesced. As Faith described it, she was under the defendant's rules and he had a weapon, so she wasn't even going to step out of line. Time out. But didn't Tim Savage say that they knew Faith was lying? Come on, man. And some, the defendant used coercive control, exemplified by a pattern of isolation rules, dependence, threats, intimidation tactics, physical abuse, and on at least one occasion, the presence of a firearm to force victims, including minors, to engage in sexual activity with the defendant and others at his direction, and to become unwilling participants in his pornographic films he created. Hold on. Oh, snap. It's great rain down here. Oh, Lord. We got a blackout. Exposure to genital herpes. Let me see how far I can go with this. Exposed to genital herpes. The defendant also exposed multiple men, women, boys, and girls. What? There you go. To a sexually transmitted and incurable disease, genital herpes, without their knowledge or consent, notwithstanding that he had been explicitly told by his personal doctor to inform his sexual partners of his diagnosis and to use a condom when having sex. As early as 2004, the defendant had been diagnosed with genital herpes. That's not true. He was not diagnosed with genital herpes, and exposed a woman who testified at trial using the pseudonym Kate, and another woman, Jane Doe 12, to herpes without their consent. Both sued him and received financial settlements in exchange for their silence, but the defendant nonetheless remained entirely undeterred by these financial consequences. Over the next 15 years, the defendant... All right, y'all. I gotta get ready to get out of here, cause I don't want to be reading and then the lights go off. So we're going to pick this back up tomorrow. Okay? All right, y'all be blessed. I'm up out of here. Hold on. Hold on. I'm gonna pick back up on page 9 tomorrow. I'm out of here. Shh, I ain't trying to get struck or nothing like that, but yeah, it's crazy. Y'all be blessed. I'm out.
Swimming in you. Hey, little mama said I wanna take her. Dipping your pool. Just go for a little dive there. Hey, yeah.